This month marks the 40th anniversary of an unlikely hit for Kiss. Kiss was never a stranger to hit music, but what makes Shandi sort of different is that it was a hit in Australia, not the United States. With their career in a steep decline at home, Kiss enjoyed a brief return to superstardom overseas thanks to an unlikely hit single. Shandi, the first single from the band's pop-dominated 1980 album Unmasked, barely cracked the top 50 in the United States, but did much better in other parts of the world. That was particularly true in Australia, where it became a top 5 hit and turned the band's first tour of the country into a headline-dominated sensation akin to Beatlemania. Paul Stanley recalls in Kiss Behind the Mask, "It reached the point where I was asking that we not have any more parties because literally every night the promoter threw us a party." Shandi was released on June 1st, 1980. It was the latest in a series of Stanley penned singles beginning with the previous year I Was Made for Loving You that took Kiss further and further away from the hard rock sound that made them one of the most popular acts of the 1970s. This was an attempt for Kiss to remarket themselves in the 80s with disco hits such as I Was Made for Loving You. This gave them more marketability and radio airplay. The stylistic shift was an attempt to further expand the band's already large fan base, but whatever gains they made in terms of a new mainstream following was more than offset by the number of old school fans who turned their noses up at the new disco and pop influenced sound and stopped going to Kiss concerts. On the band's 1979 North American tour, they struggled to sell out one show in several cities, where just 2 years earlier they were playing multiple night stands. I listened to the Eddie Trunk podcast, and I've heard him speak several times of these lean years for Kiss in the early 80s, where a lot of the diehards turned against them due to their more pop-oriented sound. You have to remember, back in the early 80s, it was either, if you were into hard rock or metal music, the whole new wave and pop genres were just a no-go. Following the release of Unmasked, record sales and general interest were low enough that the group only played one show stateside, July 25th at New York City's 3,000-seat Palladium, a far cry from the 20,000 plus capacity Madison Square Garden concerts the band was accustomed to selling out in their hometown. Planned spring and summer tours of Europe and Mexico were also canceled. Let's take a second to look at that again. We're talking about Kiss. Following the release of Unmasked, record sales and general interest were so low that they only played one show stateside to a 3,000-seat venue. That's pretty amazing looking back at the entirety of the history of the band now. But something about the AM gold swooning of Shandi struck a chord in far-flung places such as Norway, the Netherlands, and Australia. Kiss had barely even toured in Europe and had never touched foot in Australia, leaving those countries immune from the overexposure that was plaguing the band in the United States. It also helped that Unmasked was the first of their albums to be released simultaneously overseas by one company, Phonogram, who was therefore able to mount a coordinated marketing plan. Still, the reaction in Australia was a phenomenon because nobody could ever dream of planning for. Australia was like nothing we'd experienced, Stanley recalled in his autobiography, Face the Music, A Life Exposed. Huge here meant not being able to leave the hotel. It meant taking a helicopter from hotel to the stadium we were playing. We had an entire floor of the hotel with one suite devoted to our Australian public relations staff, and no wonder, since we were on the front page of newspapers every day, accompanied by headlines like Kiss and Midnight Cruise on Sydney Harbour. The place was crawling with bodyguards, and there was a constant drone of screaming outside. Unsurprisingly, Stanley agrees that with Australia's collective assessment of Shandi. "I'm real fond of the song," he declared in Behind the Mask. "I'm my own worst critic. I'm not crazy about the recording of it, but as a song, if I sit down and play it, it's real good." He still performs the song acoustically whenever the band plays in Australia, and it was included on Kiss's Melbourne Symphony Orchestra assisted 2003 live album Symphony Alive 4. Gene Simmons, with bassist Gene Simmons taking a sick day and lead guitarist Ace Frehley apparently AWOL, Stanley was the only member of Kiss who actually appears on the recording, joined by Anton Fig who was covering for Peter Criss on drums during the recording of 1979's Dynasty, and session musicians Tom Harper and Holly Knight. The filming of the music video for Shandi also marked the formal end of the band's original lineup, as appearing in it was the last thing Criss did as an official member of Kiss until his 1996 reunion with the group. As remarkable as Kiss's month in Australia and New Zealand was, it didn't fully match the career trouble they had gotten into back home. They fully realized their next move needed to be a big one. Unfortunately, the path they chose to take made things a lot worse, not better. I'd like to give credit to UltimateClassicRock.com for this article. Matthew Wilkington, released on June 1st, 2020. Thank you for listening. Please check back often for more rock music news and reviews. Please like, share, and subscribe.